Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jared Hornsby, and I'm here today to help answer any general or technical questions that you may have. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Navigating the Sea of Sameness, Your Blueprint for Unique Content in an AI World. Here's today's timing breakdown. These numbers are just rough, so please don't hold us to these. At any point during today's webinar, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to submit using the Ask a Question tab at the left side of your screen. You can also chat with your fellow attendees by clicking the audience chat, also at the left side of your screen. Let us know where you are coming in from. Here's a bit about us over at CMS Wire. We were founded in 2003, and we cover the primary topics that you see here on this slide. You can read more of our great content and register for upcoming conferences and webinars, all by visiting cmswire.com. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Velir, for making today's webinar possible. Velir is a full-service, data-driven agency that for over 20 years has helped clients foster lasting connections with their audiences by shaping meaningful ideas into memorable digital experiences. Over from the Velir side of things today, we have Jill Roberson, the SVP of Marketing. Jill, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today on Navigating the Sea of Sameness. We were really inspired to talk about this topic as there is really no question that AI is top of everyone's mind. And that's really reinforced by the fact that so many of you are taking the time out of your day to attend our webinar. So welcome. And I hope that you're as excited for this as we are. So to start with introductions, Jared introed Velir, but my name is Jill Grozalsky Roberson. I'm Senior Vice President of Marketing at Velir. And I am so thrilled to be joined with my co-presenter from Optimizely, Dean Barker. So Dean, I will let you introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. I'm also happy to be here talking with Jill today. My name is Dean Barker. I'm the Global Director of Content Management at Optimizely. Optimizely is a software vendor. We make a digital experience platform. Velir is one of our most wonderful partners. And so Jill and I have spent many a day bumming around a conference vendor floor together. So it's nice to be able to talk to you today with Jill.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, we will briefly touch on the state of content and marketing in 2024, especially since AI has been changing the game for marketers really worldwide over the last 18 months or so. And then we'll dive into a conversation with Dean around some core topics specifically relating to combating sameness, where I'll be sharing some trends and thoughts, and then Dean and I will be discussing, and then hopefully leaving you all with some really good takeaways. So hopefully you'll walk away with some takeaways around how to build a strong content foundation that enables speed, how to create a single source of truth of content, how to create your checklist for managing AI-generated content. And so without further ado, we'll dive into our content and start with the state of content and marketing. And so after doing some research at the end of last year, I wrote a blog post about doing more with less, and really that being the marketing mandate. And I think you'll see that across some additional research. Specifically, Gartner research from last summer showed that only 29% of CMOs believe they have the necessary budget to execute their strategies. So while there's a demand for more content, more measurement, enhanced engagement, and a greater use of data, marketers are trying to do all of this with less budget, right? Less resources, less time, and less focus, which is putting a lot of stress and strain on marketing and comms teams today. And so in addition to having to do more with less, marketers overall are really struggling to connect with their target audiences. And here we see that 57% of marketers are saying that creating the right content for their audience is a challenge, right? That means that marketers and content authors are struggling to find a way to connect with key users. And they're looking for ways, or tools in this case, to help really ease that challenge. And that's where AI comes in. As we're all aware, AI has entered the room as a key tool for marketers and content authors to really aid in the content creation process, especially in a time when teams are trying to do that more with less. The efficiencies that AI can provide are pretty appealing to teams all across different industries. And so with that being said, 2024 isn't the first year that we're talking about AI. We've been talking about AI really for a bit, but as this quote from an IBM study states, 2024 is the year that AI goes from something we just talk about to something we're all putting into practice in one way or another. AI is truly revolutionizing, how organizations enhance productivity, foster innovation, and stimulate creativity. It's essentially helping organizations do more with less. And so just to look at this more specifically, AI really has gone from a lot of hype in 2023 to now being a hero in 2024, which indicates the transition really from theoretical to tactical. So in 2023, the AI buzz really began to take off, and we can see that the global AI market size is increasing. More marketers and companies are adopting AI in digital marketing from 2023 to 2024. And that for executives, AI has gone from theory to a tactic, with 70% of executives expecting to increase AI resourcing in this year alone. Now, in the conversations that I've had with clients, with partners like Optimizely and other subject matter experts, when it comes to AI, these questions have consistently been popping up, which is why we're here for this webinar today. We don't have an official poll running today, but if you're using AI today to help with content creation, please feel free to pop a message in the chat. But these questions really stand true and require discussion, right? If everyone's using AI to aid in content ideation and content generation, isn't there a chance that content being created will all start to sound the same? And it's a fair question, and I'll demonstrate this on the next slide. But if more and more marketers and content authors are using AI to create more content and gain efficiencies, then how can your team and your organization still use AI while maintaining originality and making content stand out? And that's exactly what Dean and I are going to discuss here in a second. But before we get there, I thought this cartoon really summed up kind of our topic today really nicely, and hopefully what our tips and discussion today will help you combat. So let's dive into the good stuff. As mentioned, Dean is here to join me today on this awesome topic. And so we're going to cover kind of four main areas of a blueprint in terms of combating that sea of sameness for when it comes to using AI for content creation and generation efforts. So we'll dive into each of these in more detail, and I'll share some thoughts and some best practices. And then Dean and I will have our fireside chat and some commentary. So the four areas that we're going to look into in terms of building your blueprint for unique content in an AI world at a high level is you want to make sure that you're setting your foundation, you're centralizing your work, you're focusing on operations, and you're customizing and optimizing. So to start with setting your foundation, and what we're talking about here is making sure that before you introduce any sort of efficiency tools, specifically AI, it is so important for you to not only truly understand who you are as an organization, but what you represent in your markets, and making sure that you have a strong foundation for content creation management and so on. And so, as mentioned before, if any of you have used ChatGPT or a similar tool for content creation, you may start to notice trends in the outputs in terms of the wording, the sentence structure, the cadence of the content that's coming out. And so to ensure the best output from your AI prompts and that final product, you want to make sure you're infusing your requests with specifics, right, on your brand guidelines and information on what audience this content is for. And you want to continue to refine that over time. Once you receive the content from AI, you want to make sure that you're really validating it against your brand guidelines, and you want to reinforce any sort of value proposition messaging and that your tone of voice is represented, right? Again, as more people are using AI to create content, these are ways to kind of infuse your originality. You also want to make sure that any AI generated content is truly addressing the needs of your audience, which surely will make your content stand out from any sort of generic AI content that others might be putting out there. And you want to make sure that any industry specific terms, acronyms, and lingo are represented in your content as well. And lastly, a really critical piece, which we'll touch on more, is making sure that before adding AI to the mix, that you have an understanding of where and how content is being created, and that you have the appropriate workflows and governance in place to check content before it gets pushed out to your audience. And so, Dean, I would love to kind of get your perspective on this and get your thoughts on some of the key things organizations need to consider in regards to their content strategy before integrating AI into their process.
Yeah, so I love, number one, that we're talking about this because the biggest fear about AI is that everyone's going to use it. Once everybody uses it, we're back on the same level playing field. We're all just generating the same stuff. So really timely that we're talking about this. The way I'm looking at AI is really a wrapper for a message. Elizabeth Banks was the guest keynote at Content Marketing World last year, and she was wonderful. The actress, Elizabeth Banks. She was absolutely wonderful. And she made the point when talking about AI, she's a creative. And she made the point that AI is really just a representation of us, of the history of humanity, of what it can be able to train on. So AI is never really going to come up with an original thought. So that being the case, the way I'm looking at AI and the way I encourage people to look at AI is really it's a wrapper for your message. You come up with a message, an idea, a value prop. AI will help you embellish that and wrap it in text, which helps you get the point across. But you have to make sure you have a message. You have to make sure you have an angle. You have to make sure you understand your customers. You have to have a content strategy. If you have nothing to say, AI is just going to make you say nothing even more. And so you need to make sure that you have an absolute core to your message. So it's great that we are talking about this, and great, Jill, that you started off with solidify your content strategy. Make sure you have a message. It's a really funny cartoon, which has two panes. And in one pane, it says somebody's showing something on their computer, and they said, look, I can write a bullet point, and this thing expands it out to a whole email. And then the other pane, there's someone saying, look, I can take this email, I can press a button, and AI turns it into a bullet point. Well, that's really funny and everything, but that bullet point, that's the message. AI is helping us wrap the message and helping us unwrap the message. What is the message? What is the core? That's your content strategy. That's your value prop. That's a connection with you make with your customers. You have to absolutely make sure that you have that before AI is really going to help you at all. If you have nothing to say, AI is just going to let you say nothing faster.
It's a great point, Dean. And I think it's important to call out too, when we're talking about content strategy, it's not just website, right? A lot of organizations are using AI to help with social content and image creation, right? So when we're talking about content strategy, it is omni-channel, right? And really making sure that that's set, right? You understand the roles and responsibilities of the channels that you're on. To Dean, your point, what's the message on those channels? Who are you talking to? So again, it's not just content strategy for a single channel, but really every channel that you're participating on.
The other day on LinkedIn, I likened AI, generative AI, to responsive web design. I've been doing web design for 25 years. And I remember when responsive web design happened. And suddenly when people could be on phones and they could have different size resolutions, it was a little jarring to web designers at the time because suddenly we didn't control the container anymore. Suddenly we had to make sure that our idea, the thing we wanted to communicate, could adapt to different containers. And I look at AI as it's not a visual container, it's a cognitive container. If AI summarizes or otherwise rearranges your words and your format, does your message still come through? And the only way to make sure that's true is to make sure you have a well-defined content strategy. You stay on message so that just like if I have a website and someone looks at it on a mobile device, it's incumbent on me to make sure that that makes sense on a mobile device. Well, I mean, if it's incumbent on you to make sure that your message still comes through when someone summarizes it with AI or otherwise interprets it with AI or pours it into some other cognitive container. So all starts with content strategy. If anything, AI has made content strategy more important.
Perfect. And that's our first takeaway. So when using AI to create content, make sure your foundation is solid and you have the steps to validate that brand alignment and infuse your tone of voice and make sure you have that message, right? So moving on, now that we have our foundation set, the next step in your blueprint for navigating the sea of sameness is to centralize your work. And more specifically, we are talking about your content work. And AI is really an awesome tool for teams to leverage when it comes to content creation. That being said, AI is a tool to help marketers, not replace whole steps in the process. So in this chart, you can see that the challenges that marketers face when it comes to marketing, one of the most startling stats here, I think, is really about content creation challenges, of course, but I think it's also about content visibility. So one of the stats I found recently is that there's 4.6 billion pieces of content that are produced online daily. But, and it is a very big but, almost 56% of content that's created goes completely unused and unseen. And so, yes, AI can help you create more content, but we're already in a situation where in a lot of cases, we have more content than we know what to do with or that's being leveraged, right? And the reason for this is when content is created in silos, people don't know what and where content exists. So a lot of times we end up recreating the wheel. So when you're infusing AI into your content strategy, which we just talked about, in your content creation process, you want to ensure that you're adding your unique flair to your content, and you need a way to view it both on the micro and the macro level. But you want to be able to view this all in a single location. And so this is why finding a way or investing in a tool to centralize your content is so important. I thought I had animations on that. I'm just jumping around the deck. Sorry. When you centralize your content, you can really ensure that everyone has access to the most up-to-date content available, that you're able to centrally control versions, enable collaboration within and across teams, and also get content out to market and measure its impact faster so that you can truly understand how both organic and AI content is performing, and then start to adjust your strategies accordingly. And so, Dean, I know this is a topic that you've spoken about a lot, and I would love to get your thoughts here in terms of, centralizing content. And, it's oftentimes an overlooked part of the process where people, think that if they're just redoing a website or they're just managing their content in silos, what benefits do you see around centralizing content, both for general content management, but also as a way to prepare for using AI?
So I'm a huge proponent of having a digital home for creatives. One of the talks I gave all last year, one of my favorite talks, was the idea of palaces of innovation. As creatives, we need a place to centralize our work, to centralize our collaboration, to centralize our assets. So I'm a huge fan of that. I mean, if creatives need a digital home, they need a place to work in. And I'm going to go back to your first point, really, is AI is just going to wrap your message in context. Where's that message going to be developed? I mean, where is your group going to collaborate on that message? And the one thing I want to make sure that people understand is that creating content, like when you look at creating content from intake, you're standing in the shower and you get an idea for something. Well, getting from that point to something actually published and delivered and optimized and personalized to your visitors, that's a long process. That's a long chain of events. We just released our entire suite for marketing called Optimizely 1, and we identified 9 different phases around that wheel to get content out the door. AI handles one of those. I mean, AI handles kind of fingers on keyboards. It may help with some other things along the way, but fundamentally, people are using AI right now to eliminate fingers on keyboards. And that's fine, but that's just one part of the process. You still have fundamental marketing decisions you have to make, fundamental content decisions you have to make. You have to make decisions on how to analyze your content, how to synthesize those lessons and plow it back into your content. Just know that AI, generative content, it's a long string of steps in a process. And AI is really solving one of those steps, maybe 2 of those steps. I worry about teams that are laying off a bunch of creatives because they're sure that AI is going to solve all their problems. It's more than just fingers on keyboards. There is a process, and there needs to become sort of digital home and documented process for getting content out the door. These are fundamental problems about content creation I don't think that AI is going to solve. I'm trying not to be a Luddite or a cynic, but...
I think it's a good point, Dean. And, one of the things that, is still an unknown, right? There's not a lot of kind of guidelines or regulations around AI from a content perspective, right? And so we don't know what it's going to look like, if we're going to need to cite our sources, for lack of a better saying. But are we going to have to indicate when AI has been used to generate content? We don't know, right? When you are leveraging different prompts in a tool and you find something that you really like, how do you keep that right? If you don't have your content centralized, all of these other pieces that you might want to keep track of are also just going to be kind of floating around as well. And so that centralization to me is so important, and was certainly inspired by your talk at Gartner Marketing Symposium about it last year. So
good organizations treat their content as a pipeline. Content moves down the pipeline. It doesn't matter how content gets placed into that pipeline, whether a human being types it, a human being films it, or AI generates it. It's still a pipeline. There are a lot of steps that have to happen. Just understand, AI can help you with a few of those, but it does not take over your entire process. You need a process beyond just the creation of the content. So,
yep, exactly. And so our second takeaway here, in terms of navigating the sea of sameness, is to really focus on creating a single source of truth for your content so that you can easily evaluate content to ensure you're keeping your voice, also so that you're aware of what you have. Again, so much content is created and things are recreated over and over and over again because people just don't know what exists, right? So having this single source of content truth helps manage your content strategy and helps to provide visibility to what you have so that you can appropriately allocate resources and things like that. So then our next section, I mentioned earlier in our trends that we would touch more on the operational piece of AI. So let's dive in a little bit more. But when it comes to incorporating AI into your content strategy in 2024, really one of the most critical components to focus on is how to best operationalize AI and ingrain it into your everyday life if it's something that you're using as a tool. And so when it comes to AI, as mentioned previously, it's a tool, right? It's not a replacement for anything. So it demands a certain amount of attention. So like most digital technologies, AI is best incorporated into strategies when you marry together people, process, and technology, meaning that you have the right people on your team to use, to leverage, to learn from AI. You have the right AI tool to meet your needs, and you have the appropriate processes and checkpoints in place to make sure that AI use is adding, not subtracting from your overall digital experience and content strategies. So when thinking about how to scale up your capabilities, hopefully it's not too hard to read, but this is a process that's proven really successful for not just starting to incorporate AI, but to evolve and scale AI to other teams and processes. And it helps to ensure that you're still keeping your brand voice, your uniqueness, and all of this AI created content. So when thinking about operationalizing AI, you want to start small, right? You want to define your why, identify your use cases, create the laundry list in terms of where you could see AI playing a role and really providing benefits, I should say. Then you want to select one use case, right? Do a proof of concept. From there, you want to select your AI tool, right? You might want to go through an evaluation, determine the appropriate tool to leverage that's going to help with this proof of concept. You want to make sure that you're educating your team and making sure your team is familiar and trained with whatever AI tool that you've selected. And also, what are the measurements for this proof of concept and the KPIs? You want to prep your process in terms of creating guidelines for how AI should be used and what those best practices are. And then you want to make sure, as with everything, that you are monitoring and measuring, right? You want to check in on the use of AI and measure its impact. When you're doing that proof of concept, you're essentially creating a hypothesis on how AI will benefit you in terms of efficiencies or whatever it may be. And so you want to make sure that you're measuring to make sure that AI is supporting you in the way that you thought or in a positive way. Right. And so, Dean, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this and just kind of general tips that you have for those looking to formalize a process to incorporate AI.
Yeah, I love your graphic on the prior side about people, process, and technology. AI certainly handles the technology part. We talked about process previously, but how do we bring the people back into it? In the first point, we made the point that you really need to make sure you have a message that comes through. But I'm wondering, people aren't dumb. They know that generative AI is happening, especially in the tech space. When we read content, sometimes it's maybe a little bit off and we're aware that maybe a human being didn't write it, What is going to be the new currency of attention? We used to buy people's attention with content. We used to create content, we would invest that, and we would fundamentally buy people's attention with that. I created this content, I invested the time and money to do this, and so you will give me your attention in exchange for that. Well, how does that change with AI? If it becomes obvious we're using AI, will people tune out? Will people be frustrated? Will they be maybe offended that you didn't put any work into creating this content? To fend that off, we need to make sure that the people part of the triangle is handled and the people part can come through. I'm reminded of the Cheesecake Factory. I read a wonderful article about the Cheesecake Factory. Atul Gawande, who was a health writer for the New Yorker, he's a surgeon. He worked in the Cheesecake Factory kitchen for a week to watch, because Cheesecake Factory, I don't know if you've ever been there, but they deliver a lot of food and their food's really good. I've never had a bad meal there. And he wanted to know how they did it. And he talked about how they have different gateways where food goes through. And there's one person that reviews every single dish before it goes out the door. They do this final review and they make sure it's perfect and make sure the garnish is on there right. And there's just the right amount of sauce on there. And they have that kind of final review, right? This is like the chef that just makes sure the dish is perfect before it goes out the door. Make sure you have gateways that people are reviewing this stuff. I get really nervous about people just using generative AI and throwing it out the door without having a human being look over it. Just because a computer generated something, you don't have to keep it. You can change sentences. You can remove exclamation points. You can change adjectives. You can change adverbs. You should read that. You should have something read it out loud to you to make sure that your message comes through. In the programming space, generative AI is being used a lot to generate code. And what they found is that developers who are depending on generative AI are generating more bugs. And the reason why we're generating more bugs is because they're just assuming that this chunk of code that an AI generated did the right thing. They're not taking the time to investigate this and make sure that it is actually delivering the right information out of the function or whatever they wrote. The same is true of the content that AI generates. You need to have a chef standing at the window who takes a look at that dish and checks it at the last minute before it goes out to the diner, before it goes out to your visitor. And remember, just because AI wrote it doesn't mean you have to keep it. It's a starting point. I think the new currency is going to be human involvement. There's a phrase I've been hearing lately called personality-led media, which is the idea that we identify with personalities. We identify with human beings that we can forge like a remote or a parasocial connection with. And I think that we need to be extra careful about maintaining this in the world of AI. If it sounds like a computer wrote your content, people are going to tune out. Make sure there is a human angle to it. Make sure you run it through a human filter before it goes out the door. That's me defending the biological humans.
I love it. No, it's great. And it's so funny. You know, I've been talking to a lot of clients, right, who are asking, how do they maintain authority now when content is so distributed and, you know, you don't have to click to a website necessarily anymore to get information. You can ask ChatGPT a question. And one of the things that I read in terms of, you know, how to combat this sameness is to really infuse kind of your own personal story. So exactly what you're saying, Dean, right? The personality of it. When you are writing something and you're referencing an experience that you had, that automatically tells the reader that this is real, right? And so I think that's, it's very in line with what I've been reading. So I wanted to call that out. The other point I wanted to make is in terms of the gate checks, right? Or the checkpoints. Authenticity is so critical in terms of content. We can sense it, right? You know, we're not dumb. So being able to have authentic checkpoints, I think, is really important, and also contextual. If you're not reading what AI has created or really kind of going through it with a fine-tooth comb, it might be jarring for what's happening in the world, right? One of the experiences that I like to share, and I think probably resonates with everyone, is I didn't know how many emails I was subscribed to until COVID hit. Every single brand organization I've ever interacted with sent me an email telling me that, you know, in this crazy time, they were here for me. But, you know, I don't necessarily need to be hearing that from Stitch Fix. No offense. But, you know, you have to have the appropriate checkpoints and process for context as well to marry, you know, what you're saying with what's happening in the world or what's happening in your business. So I think that's really an important point as well.
Yeah, I think that we create content within the context of human experience. It's one thing that we have in common, right? Jill, you and I are both human beings. We both understand the basics of human experience, and that's the sphere of kind of relational activity that we create content in. And AI doesn't have that, and an AI can make very clear mistakes. Google just had a problem with Gemini where someone asked for it to generate pictures of Nazi soldiers, and it generated several African-American Nazi soldiers. Like, clearly, this is an aspect of human experience this AI just fundamentally didn't understand. You have to check this content that goes out. And it's funny, Jill, you mentioned the thing about an anecdote. I love the idea of anecdotes. Like, I always think that no blog post, every blog post should have the pronoun I in it. You should be saying something about yourself. I know this relates to this. But I'm wondering, what would an anecdote be to an AI? If an AI, can it even have an anecdote? I mean, if it thinks up an anecdote, like, what would that even be? You know, I remember back when they were training my language model, this thing happened or something. Like, how can an AI even relate to the concept of past tense and human experience? And it's just that basic glaring deficiency makes you understand that how we have to infuse humanity, we have to infuse people in our content for sure.
Perfect. I love it. And that's our takeaway, right? Implement the right checkpoints to ensure that you are delivering content that, you know, is authentic, it's contextual, it's unique, it's differentiated. And then it really matters to your customers, your audience, in a way that they want to consume it, right? So making sure that whatever process you define for yourself, although I think the one on the previous slide was pretty good, that you have those checkpoints to make sure, you know, as Dean said, you're checking all the food before it goes out the kitchen. So lastly, no marketing presentation would be complete without a conversation about how to optimize content for user experience. So we'll kind of dive into this. In a world where there is more content than ever before, mixed with using AI to create even more content, communication between brand and consumer can really start to feel pretty impersonal. And we need to be cautious of this fact that, you know, 66% of consumers want fewer marketing messages. And when you do reach out, they want it to be personal. So while you may be using AI to help you create a base set of content, one of the best ways to navigate the sea of sameness is to use personalization as a tool to demonstrate that you know your audience and build that connection. Personalization and experimentation go hand in hand when it comes to using AI-generated content, as they're both tactics to let you learn more about what's working and what's not working with your target audiences. When using AI for your content efforts, do not let your AI content sit on its laurels. You want to make sure that you are putting your AI content through the ringer, right? You have those checkpoints, you're reviewing its performance on a regular basis. You can use data and insights on performance of AI content to further refine prompts, to really kind of find the best way to get it right, or to get brand aligned content created for your audience. Also, testing AI content is so important to validating or updating prompts and outputs of AI content as well. And Dean, I'm curious to understand how you see AI impacting personalization and testing strategies as it becomes something that's adopted more widely across different teams.
Yeah, so I'm actually just looking, I don't want to preempt a Q&A, but someone has Julian posted a question. Given that knowing an audience is foundational, do you have ideas about how we can use AI to learn more about our unique audience and we factor into content development process? And this goes back to exactly what we were talking about, Jill. How can we figure things out about our audience? I remember 5, 6, 7 years ago, certainly before the big AI revolution, I was pitching at a university, and I was pitching Episerver at the time. And I showed them, this is how you track all your customer behavior, and then you can divide them up into segments. Like, all the customers do this, you can put this in a segment. Customers do this, you can put this in a segment. And the prospect said something that totally caught me off guard. They said, that's great, but we don't know what those segments are. We need the machine to tell us what those patterns are. And this is, I think, really the next generation of AI. It's not going to be generative, it's going to be analytic. You're going to give AI a bunch of information, and it's going to come back and say, I'm seeing this pattern and this pattern. Did you think about this? Did you think about this? We have a tool, our content intelligence tool allows you to examine all the content in your digital property, it uses NLP and AI to figure out what the content is talking about. And it puts those into a topic tree, a topic hierarchy, and then it compares that to what people are consuming. And what it can do is it can give you a dashboard and tell you, okay, you have a lot of this content, but nobody's consuming it. You don't have a lot of this content, but everybody wants this content. That's some value of AI there, to be able to tell you this is what your audience wants based on the behavior patterns I'm seeing. This is what you have, and this is the overlap. In a perfect world, you have massive overlap. In an imperfect world, you have very little overlap. You need to increase that overlap. And there are some great advances. We have AI in our content intelligence product to do that. And I think that's really the future, is going to be analytic AI.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, to that point in terms of identifying where there's too much on a topic that's not getting consumed, or there might be a gap, I think also helps to identify that area of opportunity to create that unique content. So again, going back to just this whole topic in terms of navigating the sea of sameness. So if you're able to find that area where your audience wants more content on a particular topic, you can use that as a competitive advantage, right? So to your point, Dean, I think that's, I agree that the analytical angle is really where we're going to get. And that's why like the monitoring and measuring that we talked about in the process section is so important, right? And really making sure, we talked about having your content strategy and your foundation, but also having a strong data foundation as well to make sure that you can, get your eyes on the data as we see it coming in, and, really act as quickly as the data tells you what's happening.
Yeah, I think it's great you brought back process, because this really goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. You still need to have a process. You still need an experimentation process. You still need to have a personalization process. AI can make this faster, but the process still has to exist. You have to be able to make fundamental decisions about how you want to do these things. And again, a lot of people are looking at AI as just a black box. They just throw stuff in there and hope that it all works out. And I really want to make sure that people aren't shortchanging their process and thinking that AI is just going to be a Band-Aid on everything.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, if there's no process, if your content is living in 17 million different places and it's hard to version control, AI is not going to help that situation at all. Right. It's going to add insult to injury at that point. So
agreed.
Definitely. All right. So our last takeaway in terms of navigating the sea of sameness, use personalization to stand out, really leverage it to break away from kind of standard marketing messages, and, use AI to help you get there, but you need to put your personalization angle on it for your audience, and make sure to test and learn what messaging is working best and adapt to other content accordingly, and make sure you have a process. So now that we've walked through kind of the 4 components of our blueprint for navigating the sea of sameness, I just wanted to summarize our key takeaways. So hopefully you all feel empowered to use AI in a way that's going to work best for you. You have some tips for your organization without sacrificing authenticity of your voice. So, when using AI to create content, you want to make sure you have a strong content strategy and a foundation, and you have the steps to validate brand alignment and infuse your tone of voice. Creating a single source of content truth is really helpful, so you can easily evaluate content to ensure you're keeping your voice, what content you have. Implement the right checkpoints to ensure you're delivering content that's unique. Define your process and make sure you have those authentic checkpoints, and use personalization to stand out from those standard marketing messages. So that is what we have for you. And before we go into Q&A, just wanted to kind of close out here. If you're looking to connect with Velir or Optimizely or both, We've got some events going on together. The first is a community event that Velir is hosting alongside Vercel and SearchStacks, and it's an Optimizely user group. So again, it's for the community, really any digital professionals interested in hearing from others who may be using Optimizely, who may be evaluating it, just curious to learn. We're talking best practices around a lot of things for digital experiences across the board. That's going to be in Boston on March 13th. Down near Fenway, if you're familiar with the area. The second event is the Optimizely Roadshow in Boston. So this is an Optimizely event for current Optimizely customers. Sorry, words are hard. As well as anyone who's in the marketing, experimentation field, and commerce professionals looking to learn more. So that's also in Boston on March 14th. And then Dina, I will let you talk about the other roadshows.
Yeah, we're doing a set of roadshows this year. Our first one is in Minneapolis on Thursday. So if you're in Minneapolis, we're going to be doing an event in Minneapolis where you can come visit and hear from some speakers and talk about the what's coming up at Optimizely. We're also doing San Francisco on March 7th. You mentioned Boston on March 14th. I feel like a comedian at a late night talk show saying like where they're going to be. I'm going to be at the Laugh Factory on such day. In April, we're doing Dallas on April 25th, Chicago May 9th, Atlanta May 23rd, and New York City on May 30th. I will be at several of those, and we would love for you to come. We will feed you. We will give you a little mini conference for half a day and talk to you a bit about what's coming up at Optimizely and just some really great ideas and presentations we have about content process in general. So we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. And so, Jared, we'll bring you back to help us with some Q&A.
All right. Thank you guys so much for that presentation. Let's get into some Q&A. Up first, how do you measure if your content is resonating with people, and what are the best ways to measure that content?
It's a good question. I'll take a first pass, Dean. I'm sure you've got thoughts as well. In terms of measuring if it's resonating, from a digital perspective, it's about, in my opinion, it's about engagement, right? And people taking the next step in the journey. I think, that shows that, the content was convincing in a way to keep someone engaged or to progress them to the next step where they can consume more content. So at a high level, I think that's one way to do it. Of course, there's always voice of customer research and NPS and surveys, of course, are just that firsthand feedback in terms of, hey, does this content resonate with you? And, obviously you make some assumptions out of that. But Dean, I don't know if you have additional thoughts to add there.
So I saw this question in the Q&A. I mean, this is the classic question of how do you measure engagement?
Yep.
And Jill, you talked about measuring. The way that we normally try to measure engagement is from the top down. Like, did it move somebody down the journey? If we look at 100,000 different interactions, what percentage of them moved forward? One of the best ways to do this top down is with experimentation. There you go. I'm going to pimp one of my company's own products. We sell an experimentation product. The only way to really know if content is resonating with people is to try different content and see what moves them, see what moves people further down the funnel. Experimentation platform will let you publish a blog post with 8 different headlines, and you will find out which headline is more likely to get someone to register for your webinar. You can do a landing page with 15 different pictures and 12 different versions of register now on the button. That's how you can generate if it's resonating with people. Now that's top down. I also believe in bottom up. I absolutely also believe that your marketing team should be having a conversation with your customers and talk to them about the content that you're sending to them. I do a lot of content creation here at Optimizely. I do a lot of content creation to support the sales cycle. The seller will come to me and say, I have a customer concerned about X. Do you have something that would address this? And I might write something specifically about a particular topic this prospect's interested in. And then I ask the seller, did that resonate? Did that make sense to them? If I can get a chance to talk to the prospect, I refer back to this piece of content. That's bottom up. And I think that's very, very valuable. Unfortunately, it's not terribly scalable, but I think you have to have a balance of the two.
Agreed. Thanks.
Excellent. All right, up next here. What AI tools are brands using most aside from ChatGPT?
Another good question. I would say what I've seen people using is Jasper from a creation standpoint. we use Grammarly, I think has been really helpful just in terms of helping from a grammatical perspective. I don't know, Dean, what tools are you seeing?
It depends if you're talking about text or images. For text, Jasper and Writer are very popular. We have integrations with both. For images, Stable Diffusion, and there's another one that is getting super popular. And I'm sorry for even saying that because I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. But I just want to talk about Jasper or Writer. And this is going to fail utterly as an endorsement because I can't remember which platform it was, but I've used both platforms. And what I love, this is genuine because I can't tell you which one it is, so it's not an endorsement. I love it was really concentrated on process. Not only could you press a button and generate some words, but it had your way of organizing your documents and saying that this is in draft and this has a different status and this is ready to publish. They built a content process engine alongside their generative AI engine. Now I sell a content process engine, Optimizely content marketing platform. So a little bit competitive in that sense, but also is an endorsement of the idea that it's not just writing words from magic. It's about process. It's about controlling the flow of content down a pipeline. So I was very, very encouraged by seeing that. And someday I'll remember if it was Writer or Jasper. I'll let y'all know.
Perfect.
All right, I think we've got time for another one here. How do you find that organization strategies change when incorporating AI?
I'll let you go first.
I have a very cynical answer here. I find that organizations, if their strategy changes radically, then they may be overreacting. And the biggest thing that we're seeing is them wiping out creative teams and thinking, well, AI is going to fix everything for us. And so from a human resources standpoint, they start paring down their creative teams. Whenever I see that, I cringe a little bit because I think that is a company that is taking a very short-sighted view of it. Number one, because I think there's still a huge process a process component there. But also, if you think about what they're doing, they're looking at this is the investment that we spend in content. So we could bring in generative AI, which would save us a lot of time and a lot of workload, and extend and do better and take that time we were spending on that and extend and go further and do better. But they're not. They're looking at content creation as just a cost center or an expense. And they're like, let's pare down this expense as much as possible. We don't want to do anything extra. We just want to cut our expense. And that's a little disheartening to me, and I think a little bit short-sighted. If anything, AI should be a force multiplier. It should enable you to save some resource and invest those resources in other places to make better content, to make better experiences, to push your brand further. That's my soapbox answer.
Nothing to add to that. That's perfect.
Gotcha. And I think with that, that's going to be our time for today. Thank you to Dean and Jill for your expertise. Thank you to Velir for sponsoring today's webinar. And last but not least, thanks to all of you out in the audience for your time and attention today. Today's webinar has been recorded. You'll be receiving a link to that recording and follow-up email. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. In the meantime, thank you all once again, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.